So next, we have Casey McGlynn, who is a partner at Wilson Sonsini, and he's the one who spearheads the annual medical device conference that Wilson Sonsini puts on every year. I believe it's in its 28th year now. We're very excited to have him here to give us an overview of the state of the industry. So Casey, if you could come down.
Okay, so here we go. So the first thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is just healthcare venture capital and money that's been raised and what's going on in that sector. So the first thing to note is that between 2010 and 2000, this year, basically it's moved from $1.8 billion in money raised for venture funds to about $10.8 billion. So that's about a 50% or 3x increase in funding over that period of time, or 5x. And that's just great. You notice that between 9 and 10, of course, there was a huge fall in the number of dollars raised for venture capital. That's really the period of George Bush and the financing crisis, et cetera, that kind of turned the whole world sideways. And it took literally 5 years for us to get back to that $5 billion or $6 billion in 2014. So it's been a climb each year, and that's great. The slide below that, or the images below that, are really looking at investments into companies by round size. And I want to really give you a sense of what's going on in venture capital, because the truth is that the amount of money going, when we look at the money that's going in on a quarterly basis, actually something like 50% of the dollars are going into rounds of financing that exceed $50 million. So this is venture capital today, which is basically investing in very late stage or very expensive projects, not the stuff that's going to be coming out of UCLA, not early stage startups. And when you look at what's the percent of those venture dollars that are going into basically rounds that are less than $5 million, and over the last few years, it's been about 3 or 4%. So very small, really attention span from small micro venture capitalists that are investing money still in the industry. This next slide is trying to look at basically the number of deals that get done in a single in a single quarter, and you can see that in the first quarter of 2017 there were about 250 deals done, and that there's about almost 4 million done at the end of Q4 of 19. So there's been a lot of growth since that over the last few years, and that's great. But again, I think we need to look, just kind of what's going on in each one of the areas. So in biopharmaceutical, you see over that period of time that the U.S. investments were about $7.7 billion, and it's grown in 2019 to about 15.6, which is a doubling. But if you look at health tech, that's also had a very significant increase, 3.3 to 7.5. And devices too have grown, but not by quite that amount. It's about 1.7 times over this 3-year period. But nonetheless, it is growth, and it makes it it's an important piece of money for these companies. I want to talk also about the Series A rounds, because again, these are the way we define a Series A round is there is a known National Association of Venture Capitalists that invested in the round, or the round was more than $2 million. And that's what these numbers were all about. And when we look at the Series A deals and the number of investments that are going on, you can see that from 2017 to 2019, the actual number of the number of investments has risen from 77 to about 105. But the number of dollars actually going into these Series A deals has been very flat. And this includes, this data obviously includes Europe and the United States. And then, I think in Europe, the number of dollars that are actually going into medical devices has been much smaller in terms of actual money going in there. Although there are a lot of dollars from European investors that are actually coming into the United States. The graph below, at the bottom half of the page, is talking about the top indications. And I would just say to you that the typical top indication over the last 10 or 15 years has been cardiovascular. And this is really the king of all the segments. It's the largest single segment in the medical device field, and one of the largest just in terms of dollars spent in the healthcare system. But this year it was imaging, and you might ask yourself, what's going on with imaging? Why is imaging at the top? And it's the way they break things out with regard to imaging. Imaging has two different sectors right now that it's feeding off of. One of them is robotics. Many of the robotics products, and there are lots of robotic deals going on right now, have imaging associated with them because they're remote from the site of the procedure. And so imaging is a very important thing for that. So that really belongs down, if we're thinking about where the real stuff's going on, it belongs under surgical. And the other is, if you think about the really hot areas of medical device in cardiovascular, you think about things really focused on the implantation in the aorta, et cetera, with these new products. And you think about also in the cardiovascular area, you would think about things like afibrillation, et cetera. And all of these, again, have very advanced imaging features with regard to them. So imaging is really, in many respects, it's there, it's listed as one of the top indications, but it's really a subsector of these others that we historically would see, which is cardiovascular and also this surgical one with robots really catching a big piece of it. Now, neurology is another really interesting one. It's one of the top indications, and the thing about neurology that's so interesting is that many of the neurology indications are 510K. So if you think about the catheter systems that are going to go into the brain, trying to break up clots, remove material after a stroke, et cetera, those products are primarily 510K products. And of course, there are many other products in the neurology area that are PMA, such as implants in the brain, et cetera, to deal with Parkinson's or some of the other diseases where a lot of work is going on right now. I wanted to just look with you at on the far side of the lower half here. We have a list of some companies that had quote unquote big deals, and just give you a sense of what are those big deals. So one of them, Ablicon, is a AFib company, and Calera is a kidney stone removal, and we've got epilepsy and BioLing, and EP mapping is obviously AFib. And then we've got some other companies that are focused on organ protection, which is really a super interesting and important area, and I think there's going to be more and more going on in that area. We also have transcatheters with Tioga. We have oncology with Euclidia, and there's another neuromodulation one here at the very bottom. So a lot of interesting companies, and they're raising a bunch of money. This next slide, again, is focused on Series A deals in the last year, talking about the pre-money and the deal side of those deals. And you can see in the cardiovascular area, those are typical PMA projects, very large projects, very expensive, cost a lot of money. You can see that the pre-money valuation is higher than most of the other areas, which we would expect. And also the deal size is quite large, $12 million for these Series A deals. Orthopedics is another area that's been, I'd say we've seen a lot of really interesting products over the last few years. And again, we see this imaging, which is dealing with robotics primarily, and some of the other areas. And again, neurology, which is 510K. And if you look at neurology and ophthalmology, and you notice how small the pre-money is and how little the money is that's being raised, you think to yourself, maybe this is a stepchild in the medical device industry. But that's not really what's happening here. With regard to neurology and ophthalmology, many of those products, again, are 510K products. And also, they are earlier stage products than you would see in Series A going on in the cardiovascular area. So they're taking a little bit less money to make the next reasonable milestone, and that's why the deal size turns out to be smaller and the valuations turn out to be smaller. But these have been super interesting areas, and of course, ophthalmology is a huge business in Orange County and in the down here in the Southland. So it's one of the key indications down here in Southern California. Let's see. This next slide is moving from is again talking about devices and deals with top indications. And you can see here we're not talking about the Series A deal. We're talking about just devices in general. And you can see that cardiovascular is number 1 and vascular is number 5. The thing about vascular versus cardiovascular, many of the same players in both of those markets and many products that are quite similar. But the thing about vascular that's interesting is that it's typically a 510K application and therefore allows you to get into the, raise less money, develop a product, get into man much quicker than you can get into man in the cardiovascular area. So these are, basically showing a general increase in the amount of money being raised over the last 3 years. And also on the left-hand side, they're showing total deals and dollars in the U.S. and Europe and how that's been increasing. Again, these 2019 deals, really interesting companies. Acutus is one of our clients. It's in the AFib area. CMR is a surgical robot. Think is a total knee robot. So really interesting things. Here, this company, Ablative Solutions, they honestly never, until this last round, were able to raise money from venture capitalists. They're a company that required a PMA. They were looking at denervation. So they had a very simple catheter system that could use a drug, alcohol, on the outside surrounding the vessel that was going into the kidneys and actually denerve that area, and as a result of it, release the pressure on that particular vessel and lower blood pressure. And this is really something that was done about literally over 10 years ago by a company sold to Medtronic for over $1 billion, but which could never did finally get regulatory approval, but has never really caught the market. So it'll be interesting to see what Ablative Solutions can do. There are a bunch of other companies here. PQ Bypass is another one of our clients. It's peripheral artery disease. They have very long lesions, and they have a special catheter to deliver it. And some of these companies, honestly, have struggled for a long time to raise their money, but this is finally coming, to the fore and beginning to happen for them. Let's see, this next slide is just trying to talk a little bit about some of these important companies. In the neurology area, you've got this company Neuralink. They did a big round of financing of $51 million. They had a post of over $500 million. So these are fantastic results. And this actually connects humans to a computer. So we're one-on-one. And this is one of Elon Musk's companies, and he's done quite well. Let's move to the next slide. Just wanted to look with you at some of the active investors. So Keiretsu Forum is an angel organization that has about 5 or 6 different kind of groups all around the country. And when one group decides to make an investment, they then begin to syndicate it at some of their others. And so they've been very successful at raising money for companies. It's quite a long process, but a very good area to be looking at. Aperture is in New York. They're a major investor in medical devices. They have a doctor there that's just a terrific guy and has made a lot of investments. Below that is Shang Bay Capital, and they're in Palo Alto. It's the guy that runs that used to be the CFO for Microport and also Boston Scientific in China. He's Chinese, but he was born in the United States and lives here now in Palo Alto, and he's been a super active early stage investor. Of all of the investors listed here, these guys are the earliest stage. So if you have a really interesting company in the medical device field, this is the guy that I think would take the most interest in it. The next 2 companies, I'm just trying to get you to realize who these venture guys are. Endeavor and Guild. Those are European investors. They're very late stage investors. They want to put a lot of money to work. Endeavor is from Switzerland, and Gilda is from the Netherlands. I'm going to move on because I want to spend a couple of minutes honestly just talking to you about something very important and near and dear to my heart, early stage companies. Okay, a bunch of you have looked at a lot of data, but how should you think about fundraising? First, we looked at Series A deals, since this is typically the first round for venture capital. But the truth is that that's late stage money for a startup. If you're at UCLA with a big idea, here's the process to consider if you want to go for it. First, find a mentor out of that industry that'll work with you. Someone who has been successful running a company in the healthcare space. Then go to talk to OTL, Office of Technology Licensing, about your idea and ask them about the process for starting a company with IP that was created in the UC system. Talk to them about getting a patent filed for you or assigning that intellectual property to you if they decide not to file a patent. Think about forming a corporation and issuing yourself founder's stock. Talk to UCLA about the UC Doc in the Box program. They will link you up with an attorney who will create your corporation for you for no cost. So this is a way for you to get your company up and running without any cost. We do it at Wilson Sonsini all the time, and honestly, there are some great things coming out of the UC system. Find a lawyer to help you on that Doc in the Box program, and this will allow you to form a corporation with a good law firm and without any cost to you, other than the filing fees, which are very nominal. Finally, negotiate and get a license from the Office of Technology Licensing from UCLA for your technology. And then think about forming an advisory board of experts in various areas to advise you. And then think about government grants and apply for appropriate NIH and other government grants to fund and develop your company. Think about the military as a source of those grants. And think about hiring a grant writer to help you if you don't have experience in this area. Finally, create an executive summary that clearly anticipates your company and talks about it in a way that people can understand. And then begin to network with the startup ecosystem around UCLA, at Irvine, at UCSF, and in the Bay Area. When you've made some progress, go out and raise that money with a convertible note or safe instrument. That's the path that will work for you, I think, in terms of starting a company, finding capital, and being able to move your company forward. Thank you for listening.